Mr. Franzese, it's the rule of this subcommittee that all witnesses are sworn. So will you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you will give this subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Would you tell who is accompanying you and in what capacity?
Morning, Senator. My name is Bruce Kelton. I'm attorney for Mr. Franzese.
Yeah, I assume you're not going to answer any questions.
No, I'm not.
All right. Mr. Franzese, if you would proceed with your statement.
Okay, sir. Mr. Chairman, Senator Roth, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Michael Franzese. I am here today to testify about the ties between organized crime and professional boxing, a subject which I can discuss based on a great deal of first-hand knowledge since I was involved in both. I was a capo in the Colombo La Cosa Nostra crime family. My father was at one time the underboss. It was through my father that my brother and I got interested in professional boxing. My father was an amateur boxer and maintained a strong interest, both sporting and business, in boxing. He owned interests in several boxers, including Rocky Graziano, and was involved in business deals with several boxing promoters. When I was inducted into the Colombo family on October 31st, 1975, I was assigned initially to Andrew Russo, one of the Capo regimes. Russo is a first cousin to current family boss Carmine Persico Jr., and at the time of my induction, he served as an acting boss to then family boss Thomas DeBella. At that time, Russo owned a middleweight boxer named Vito Antifermo, who eventually became the middleweight champion. Myself and other family members were often told in advance what the outcome would be of many of Antifermo's fights. This enabled us to bet successfully on these bouts. On occasion, I was present at Monty's restaurant in Brooklyn when Russo would meet with other managers and fight promoters regarding Antifermo's opponents. The bouts would be arranged and certain family members would be assured of the outcome. However, when it came time for Vito to fight Marvelous Marvin Hagler for their first title bout at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, we were told the outcome was not predetermined and that we were on our own with regard to any bets we might place. Both myself and Russo and about 10 other Colombo family members attended the fight and the post-victory party. Actors James Caan and Burt Young also attended the party with us, since both are friends of Russo and other family members. I also maintained a business in professional boxing, an interest in professional boxing. In 1982 and 1983, I owned an 8% interest along with an associate in a middleweight fighter by the name of Davey Moore. Owning a fighter did not always result in our acting in his best interests or in the interests of professional boxing. For example, on June 16, 1983, Moore was scheduled to fight Roberto Duran. Davey was not in the best of shape physically, and he wanted to have the fight rescheduled. In fact, the owners were of the opinion that Moore had no chance to beat Duran in the condition he was in. Since betting against him in this case would be a sure win, the decision was made to allow the fight to go on as scheduled. The fight took place, bets were placed, and the outcome was as predicted. Both myself and my associates collected our winnings. While I do not know specific details as to how Moore was able to pass the physical, I was told by my associate not to be concerned about problems with the State Boxing Commission, that everything would be taken care of. Obviously it was. In 1983, Chet Cummings, a New York boxing promoter and longtime acquaintance of my father's, was approached by Bobby and Victor Guerrero, who used the name Victor Quintana, to help arrange a meeting with Don King for the purposes of discussing the possibility of co-promoting some major boxing events. Unbeknownst to all of us at the time, Guerrero was an undercover FBI agent and Bobby an undercover informant working a sting operation directed at professional boxing. They told Cummings they had a substantial amount of money to invest in this deal. Aware of my father's connection to organized crime, Cummings introduced Guerrero and Bobby to my father with the intention of having him arrange a meeting for the pair with Don King. My father in turn introduced them to me. Up until that time, I had never met with King personally, although I had been in his presence on one prior occasion. My father knew I had not met King. However, he knew I would be able to make contact with him either through family connections or through some of my own contacts. I agreed to meet with Guerrero and Bobby for the purpose of arranging a meeting between the parties. At my initial meeting with Guerrero and Bobby, they told me they wanted to launder a great deal of money they had accumulated dealing in narcotics in South America. They assured me, however, that they were no longer in the drug business and that they wanted to launder their money so it could be invested into legitimate businesses here in the United States. In their view, co-promoting professional boxing events was the perfect vehicle for such a purpose, and Don King was the ideal promoter. They figured that co-promoting major events with King could enable them to launder millions of dollars on a single event. Although I had never done business with King in the past, I understood through conversations with other family members that he had no problem working with organized crime guys. Furthermore, I recalled attending a meeting in or about the year 1976 where Paul Castellano, then boss of the Gambino family, and Thomas DeBella, boss of the Colombo family, met with King and berated him regarding certain business dealings. While I do not recall the specific details, I do remember that it involved King's knowing the outcome of fights in advance because he owned both fighters. I also recall DeBella saying that King assured him that the families would not lose any money on whatever deals they had going together. At subsequent meetings with Guerrero and Bobby, I agreed to arrange a meeting with King. I explained to them that he had connections to a family other than my own, and that protocol would require me to obtain approval from the leadership of that family. The family operated out of Cleveland. They apparently understood. The next step for me was to place the entire transaction on record with the leadership of my own family. At the time, if I recall, Carmine Persico Jr., Colombo family boss, was unavailable due to his imprisonment or to strict supervision he was under from the Department of Probation. In his absence, I met with his son, Alphonse Aliboy Persico, and Joe Tomasello, both of whom were family capos. I was given their blessing to proceed with the deal. Through prior conversations and business dealings with Tom Corky Vastola, a DeCavalcanti family soldier, I was aware that he had done business with King in the past. I intended to use him as a liaison to the Cleveland family to clear the way for the deal to move forward. I arranged a meeting with Vastola and his capo, Jimmy Rotunda, at Gargiulio's restaurant on Coney Island. I brought Guerrero and Bobby with me. Initially, I sat down privately with Rotundo and Vastola and briefed them on the details, while Guerrero and Bobby waited at another table. I made it clear to them that I was only able to qualify these men to a point, and that the conversation should proceed cautiously regarding the legitimacy of the transaction. Guerrero was then summoned to the table and asked how much money he was prepared to invest. He was told that dealing with King was playing in the big leagues and that King would not be interested in dealing in small change. Guerrero said he had $3 million to invest initially. The amount was satisfactory, and the DeCavalcantis agreed to contact the Cleveland family. Within a short time of the meeting, I was contacted by Vastola and told the Cleveland family approved my going forward. The next step was to arrange a meeting with King, having received the blessings of all the relevant parties. While at the offices of Spring Records in Manhattan, I mentioned to both Roy and Julie Rifkin, who were longtime family friends and business associates in the music industry, that I was going to reach out for Don King. They suggested that I go through the Reverend Al Sharpton, since he often boasted of having a close relationship with King. I knew Sharpton and was aware that he was associated with people in the Genovese family, in particular with family soldier Danny Pagano. I met with Pagano and explained the co-promotion deal. I told him if Sharpton could make it fly with King, that I would cut him in for a piece of the action. Sharpton, in turn, would take care of Pagano and the Genovese family. Pagano said it was fine for me to go through Sharpton. At this point, I anticipated the financial arrangement to add up to a 50-50 split between King and Guerrero. I, in turn, would receive 50% of Guerrero's cut, out of which I would take care of my family and Sharpton. It was my understanding that the Cleveland family would receive a share out of King's end of the deal. I then met with Reverend Sharpton, who had been briefed on the details by Pagano. He agreed to arrange the meeting with King. Prior to introducing him to Guerrero and Bobby, I explained to him that I could only qualify the two co-promoters to a point, and that he should inform King to proceed cautiously if he agrees to meet with them, as if he were talking to FBI agents. Sharpton reached out for King, explained the situation, and King agreed to meet with us all. The meeting took place on January 12, 1983, at King's Manhattan offices. Sharpton, Guerrero, Bobby, King, and myself attended. Initially, I met privately with King. I explained to him that the two were ex-narcotics dealers in South America and that they wanted to launder a substantial amount of money by doing co-promotion deals with him. I explained that they would invest the money and expect a 50% split with him, and that I in turn would receive a 50% split of their end. I informed him I had touched base with the Cleveland family on the transaction, and he was aware of that. I also repeated to King what I had told Sharpton, that I could only qualify these guys to a point, and until we can get more comfortable with them, speak to them as if he were talking to FBI agents. We further talked about licensing the promoters in the various states the bouts might be held. I told King they had already acquired a license in New Jersey through a friend of mine. King told me not to worry about licenses because he could get them licensed in any state. I made him understand that my family was very interested in seeing this deal go forward, and that if it proceeded successfully, that I too had a substantial amount of cash to invest in his promotions. King assured me that I should not be concerned about losing money on any family situation. Having made all of this clear between us, we invited everyone in for the meeting. At the general meeting among King, Sharpton, Guerrero, Bobby, and myself, it was agreed that the co-promotion would go forward. The next step was for Guerrero and Bobby to come up with the money. For reasons I am unaware of, the money never came forward. As far as all of the other principals to this deal, including Don King, were concerned, the deal was ready to proceed. As you can see, the preparations for this single deal involved members of 4 organized crime families: the Colombo, the DeCavalcanti, the Genovese, and the Cleveland families, along with boxing's leading promoter. The very nature of the sport, the fact that many of its major participants, from the fighters themselves to their managers and trainers to some of the top promoters, have their origins in the streets, makes professional boxing a prime target for organized crime. Due to their backgrounds, it makes it relatively easy in many cases for organized crime figures to deal with many of those people associated with the sport. Traditionally, organized crime has been attracted to boxing because of the money to be made gambling on fights. It has been able to exert a significant amount of control and influence over the people in control of the sport. In recent years, the attraction has increased due to the huge amount of money that can now be made by controlling major fighters and the rights to promote their events. In my opinion, professional boxing will always hold a major interest for members of organized crime. However, it has been my experience in recent years that organized crime figures are becoming increasingly more reluctant to get involved in enterprises or activities that are in some way monitored or controlled by the federal government. This is due to the great amount of pressure the federal government has placed on organized crime in the past decade and the relative degree of success it has had in prosecuting many family members. Therefore, any federal involvement in boxing is likely to result in less organized crime involvement in the sport. I hope I have clarified the picture with regard to my involvement and that of the various organized crime families in professional boxing today. I will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Franzese, when you first met with the undercover team, they told you they wanted to launder drug money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yet the illicit source of their money did not deter you from proceeding with the deal.
That's correct.
You testified that you also informed King during your private meeting that the deal was to be done using drug money that the undercover team wanted to launder through King. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Did King object to the illicit source of the money?
No, he did not.
Did King make any specific comment regarding the illicit source of the money?
No.
Did King object to being used to launder illegal drug proceeds?
No, he didn't.
Did he express any reservations whatsoever about doing this deal?
None that I could recall, no.
You testified that you also told King that Guerrero and Barrett were licensed promoters in New Jersey. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know how they obtained their New Jersey promoter licenses, and were they obtained lawfully?
I do know how they were obtained. There was Chet Cummings, who I had mentioned earlier, had a connection with a fellow, I believe, by the name of Bob Lee. And he was able to license these fellows for a price. And I know that they paid to have this license.
How do you know that?
I was told this from Chet Cummings, and I had prior knowledge of other licenses that they were able to obtain.
Now, you said you were a capo in the Columbia family. Are you still organized? Are you still a member of organized crime?
No, I'm not.
When were you inducted into the Colombo family, and can you describe your induction ceremony?
I was inducted in 1975. It was Halloween night, and it was a ceremony that I guess it has been described in the past, but was a certain oath that I had to take and a certain procedure that was followed.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and I'll yield to Mr. When you were inducted into the Colombo family, as you stated you were, it's my understanding that a person cannot resign from the mob, yet that is what you say you have done. How were you able to accomplish this?
Well, it's true you can't resign from the mob, and I never formally handed in a resignation. I just chose not to be involved anymore and sort of went my own way.
Are you aware of any threats made against you as a result of your leaving the mob?
Yes, I have been made aware of threats.
In your statement, you said that extensive betting occurred by organized crime on the fights of certain boxers because you had inside information. How much money are we talking about being bet on these fights?
Oh, several $1,000s. I remember bets being placed as much as $50,000 to $100,000 on a fight, on a single person.
Now, you stated that Andrew Russo, a capo and one-time acting boss of the Colombo family, owned boxer Vito Altofermo.
Correct.
Was Russo the manager of record?
I don't believe so, no.
But Russo controlled him and called the shots even though he was not listed as the manager of record?
That's correct, yes.
Was it well known within boxing that Russo controlled Altofermo?
Yes, it was pretty wide out in the open.
Now, I understand that he has embarked on an acting career. Are you familiar with any of his recent roles?
Other than that of The Godfather 3, no.
What did he play in that role?
I think he was a bodyguard.
Now, in addition to the boxers you identified, can you recall any other boxers who fight you bet on with inside information? What were the outcome of both of these fights and your bets?
Well, other than the Davey Moore fight, and I had certain information on the Jerry Cooney fight when he fought with Larry Holmes, and we were aware of the outcome of that fight in advance.
How did you know that information?
Through direct information from Jerry Cooney.
Did you win a lot of money?
Yes.
How much?
About $30,000.
You stated that you attended a meeting in 1976 where two organized crime bosses called King on the Carpet Was that because a boxing match did not turn out as planned, even though King controlled both boxers in the match?
It was something related to that, yes.
And how did King resolve the situation?
Well, by the end of the meeting, I was told